Welcome, everybody, to the Andy Dare Show. This is episode 11. This week I do an interview via Skype with Adam Carolla Superfan Giovanni Giorgio, and we discuss our top 5 favorite punk albums of the 1990s. I apologize for any bad sound on my part, but it is an amazing episode, so do check it out.
All right, thanks everybody for checking in to the 11th episode of the Andy Dare Show. I'm your host, Andy Dare, doing a little musical podcast, and I'm so lucky today. I've got superfan Giovanni Giorgio talking via webcam. Gio, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Andy. How you doing?
Yeah, doing very well. Starting to rain over in Chicago, but we had a nice weekend. You are Adam Carolla Superfan, archivist, podcaster, and creator of geopodcast.com. Could you tell a little bit of the journey from, just being a fan of Loveline to now pretty much controlling the most powerful database for Adam Carolla fans and superfans like yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's really strange. I don't really have a grasp on it myself. I was in Hawaii for my job. It was outsourced, and I was living there, and I was miserable, and I couldn't get the morning show as a podcast because nobody ever mentions it. But the Adam Carolla Morning Show, which was on for 700 episodes plus, it was a very popular podcast with over 40,000 downloads per day. It was released in like 12 episode segments, and the guy who was doing it was slacking on his job a lot. And there was like a lot of guests who were not on the morning show I wanted to hear. So I decided to call in one day. I'm like, what the fuck do I have to lose? I just want to hear this shit done, and nobody else is calling and asking, and I'm sick of waiting around for it.
Yeah.
And then you couldn't call from outside of their broadcast market. So I tried calling. I was at the gym like 2:45 in the morning. I wanted to get on hold. And they just went to a straight to like a voicemail. So then a couple weeks later, I found out or a couple days later probably, I found out the out-of-state line. And then I called that, and I didn't want to bother people. So I ended up calling in like 19 times, I think, in the last 14 months of the show. And there was this immediate sort of weird thing that kind of worked, kind of clicked. I don't know what it was. But I didn't want to call in a lot.
A little bit, I do like it, though.
Well, Adam and Drew always riff on it. Apparently it's some older, like Albert Brooks. Some bizarre Great Magnet shit, yeah. God, 3 a.m. I'm on a street corner. To that. Adam Carolla being something people have always kind of talked about. Some weird, they don't have a god, so they believe in some sort of weird, bizarre force that causes all random events to segregate non-randomly. So like when you flip a coin, it's not heads, tails, heads, tails. It could be heads 55,000 times in a row, then tails. It's completely random. And these events seemingly happen out of nowhere. So they blame it on this giant orb in space that kind of controlled these random occurrences. And what was strange is in 2008, Science Daily posted this report on what they called a bizarre interstellar hibernating magnet that has just been discovered that has some sort of weird influence on things that they don't quite understand. So maybe they are right.
So this might be something that's an actual truth. Huh?
There actually is a great magnet. Who knows what it actually does? But there's apparently many of them, and they're hibernating, and they're called bizarre interstellar hibernating magnets. The word bizarre just immediately, I was like, oh, that's what that is.
All right, very cool. Well, how long was it until the radio show switched formats and he was kind of, stuck at this crossroads of whether to do it on his own through the podcast mode here?
Well, it was the last 14 months of the show was when I called in. So I called him from January till the end of February. So January 08 to the end of February 09. And then he was getting the podcast done. I found out about it a couple days early, but not months early or anything. I didn't want to believe it. And I was actually starting up doing the official show blogs for them at the time, and nobody was responding to me. I'm like, oh, they must not like my writing. I get it. Try to insult me. And then clearly,
Yeah,
little did I know. And then, of course, when Chaffee was initially setting up the podcast, I was the guy going, 250,000 people are going to download this, right? And he was like, I don't think so. I think we'll be all right. Everybody was like, yeah, I think it'll be okay. I was like, no.
They were doing it out of his house? Right?
Yeah, out of Adam's house for the first,
out the computers.
Yeah, first 30 episodes or so were out of Adam's actual house. And so he was actually contacting me and a couple other fans, and we were helping him figure out all the ways to do this. And if you actually listen to the very first podcast, Adam thanks me on it with Mike Chaffee and Donnie.
Well, how long did it take for the bandwidth issue to come to Adam, like that he'll actually have to shell out some money to follow this dream?
First week he knew.
First week, really?
Yeah. Basically by episode 2 he knew they were going to need a bigger boat. And then by episode 3 and 4, it became clear how much the bill was going to be.
Wow.
And then he ultimately shelled out like, I think it was like $120,000.
Yeah, a price to pay for freedom that, is actually, sounds corny, but priceless to, be able to program your own thing, do your own thing, not worry about, Jack Silver or whatever the guy's name was.
Had they known or had they listened, they probably could have set up some sort of their own, their own servers, whatever they had to do for less than $120,000. If they would have put the money up front, if they knew that's how much it was going to be. I think everybody assumed eventually like something would come in or something would change. So I think they were trying to write it out and just be like, oh, pay for it for now and see what happens. And then when I came up with the Adam Carolla DVD set, that actually garnered enough profits, revenue, to pay Adam back for every dime he spent on us. So I came up with a way for all the fans to pay him back.
Well, that's awesome. We thank you, Gio, for that.
Yep.
But how about for your own podcast, geopodcast.com? Are you about to feel some of that bandwidth pain by having to shell out for your thing, or not yet?
No, I have a free WordPress.com blog, which everybody will make fun of and say, oh, you're not professional if you have that. But the great thing about WordPress.com as opposed to WordPress.org or other hosting places is they'll give you unlimited bandwidth, literally. So I could literally give them as much traffic as Adam gives, and the worst they could do is just start throttling me or have my bandwidth start to kind of suck. But with my listenership, it's nowhere near what Adam gets, and the demand for my show is not like what Adam gets. Like, where I'll get several hundred at a time, he'll have tens of thousands. And I have ultimately thousands of listeners, but not hitting my my files as much as Adam's files are getting hit. So, no, I'll be fine. And also with WordPress.com, it's kind of like if you don't want to make money or if you're not trying to, they'll take care of everything for you in that regard, and then you just pay them like your $100 annually or whatever, and it's pretty much set. So.
That's awesome. Yeah, I hope the people at Podbean take a listen to that because, I don't want to start shelling out either. So
yeah. I mean, if you want to switch from Podbean, see, like Podbean and these other services that kind of they do it all for you in that way. Nobody seems to like them, like fan wise. Like all the shows I have to go to, they're on Podbean. Not a fan. I don't like Lisbon either. Really? Libsyn. Everybody uses Libsyn too, and I'm not a fan. Really. I mean, you should be branching out with crazy hosting that nobody knows of, or you should just be using something like WordPress.com where you can kind of customize it all to yourself. And you don't pay, you pay for the amount of space you use, not how often that space is used by your listeners.
Well, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I might have to start looking into that. But, I've heard people talk both ways about how they want to hear more of Gio's voice on the podcast and that they don't want to hear it. I'm in the former group. I do like hearing the interviews, especially you get luminaries of the Ace Broadcasting Network, such as like Teresa Strasser, you got Anderson, you got Blaster Girl, all sorts of names.
Adam.
And I do like hearing and Adam, let alone Adam. But, you do still have the naysayers who just want to hear the old tapes?
Yeah, all the time, but they don't understand that I can't just release a show of old tapes, and if they want to hear its old tapes, they can go to Loveline Tapes for now. And if they keep, acting like assholes and telling me what to do, and they don't listen to me, then we'll never get access to the old actual, Loveline's actual archives, the ones they have that they lied about. And Loveline Tapes will go kaput like all the rest of the websites, and you won't be able to get fan-made files anymore.
Really?
So, what I'm trying to do, my negotiations. I'm one of the guys
who does like hearing the interviews, and I hope you keep them up too.
Yeah. So. Well, as long as I do the show, I have to have my voice in there a certain amount, just to, if I ever got in some sort of issue, I could be like, hey, listen, I put this much content in there. If not, then I'm kind of risking things. So if any episode you don't hear me very much, I'm basically saying, fuck it, I don't care.
Yeah, I don't care. Yeah. Cool. Well, let's see. What else do I got here? Are you going to be on any other podcasts? I saw you were on Fudge Factory, and I have been listening to that and liking what I've been hearing. So.
Yeah, it's the last episode of the Fudge Factory. My second and final Geo report is in episode 8 of the Fudge Factory, which you can find on iTunes or anywhere else. But yeah. Cool. Well, that one's kind of sad because Katie Levine is leaving AceNet. She Blaster Girl. She's been there for over a year. She's this great employee. Everybody there loves her. I'm not even there day in, day out, and I know how great she is, and it's kind of sad that she's going over to Earwolf, the other comedy podcast.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've been seeing her name popping up a lot in, like, associate producer status on a lot of these branching shows, like, Ace on the House and stuff like that.
No more. So, last week on the network, she's gone.
That's too bad. Well, maybe it's Gio's time to be associate producer.
No, I think what they have to do is kind of consolidate for a while over there. I'm going to be out here for the time being. It's going to be rough.
Yeah, it's tough producing a show like half the country away, right?
I don't really produce, it's more I do, I do what I do, but I'd like to do more daily, but that's a whole other Loveline thing and a bunch of other shit going on, so you never know what's going to happen with that.
Cool. Well, any word on being back on Adam's show or on the
I'm going to be out in L.A. at the end of the month. Hopes are to be on the show. It's not booked yet, but I'm trying to work out all the details.
Awesome. We got to, me and the Fleetcast fellas got to come see you at the Park West for Corolla's show. I think that was in March, and had a blast. Thank you for, helping us through the mob. It was quite a mob scene after the show, but you were nice enough, you and Katie were nice enough to kind of hold us to the side and make sure that we got photos and got to meet the man. So we do appreciate that.
Oh, no problem. How is it with you and the Fleetcast guys? Everything good? Copacetic? Or is there...
Everything's gret. Yeah, we're all like childhood friends. It's just basically, a money issue, just an issue with me being able to get down to the city, twice a week, and I'm just not able to do that with my job getting a little busier. And also, I just kind of wanted to branch out and just kind of focus on the music talk. I'm just a music nut every day, listening to new music. So, I just needed a way to channel that, and I really wasn't getting enough time on the Fleetcast. However, I will be back on there eventually doing, guest spots and whatnot, and they will be on mine as well. So I actually was just having Drew in the house last night, chilling. So
cool. All right, man. You want to get into our list?
Yeah, definitely. I was this episode I wanted to focus on punk music, and we were talking about the different decades, and we narrowed it down to the 1990s. It was a weird era because punk was actually becoming the mainstream at this point. And a lot of people say it was getting watered down. A lot of people say punk was, transforming and getting a little less, with the rigid definition of punk music. But that's why I like it. Yeah, I'd like to hear your definition of punk music.
Mine would fall in line with Greg Graffin's. He posted this thing online. It's several pages long. It was like a manifesto on what it means to be a punk and the idea of it. It was about a decade ago he posted. It was right after the end of the 90s, like right around 2000. It was on Bad Religion's website, which doesn't exist anymore. But I think you can still find online if you do a Google search for Greg Graffin, what it means to be a punk or punk a manifesto or something. And I figure he's the best person to define what that is because he kind of wrote, he's had a punk band for 30 years. Nobody else has.
Exactly. I do love how Bad Religion was able to bring a sort of intelligence to punk that it was sorely missing. In the late 70s when it broke into the early 80s, there wasn't a lot of highly intelligent punk. I mean, you can say The Clash and stuff like that, but it's really Bad Religion and the people who were on Epitaph Records and who started it that were putting more a lyrical spin on punk, and I do appreciate that.
Yeah, I love the harmonies, I love the melodies, but I also like the idea behind the lyrics. I can listen to a 16-year-old Greg Graffin, whining about some sort of issue that's still completely relevant today, and I like that song, and I can still bob my head to that song and be like, it's a fucking good song, or I can hear him do a new rendition of it today, and I'm like, those lyrics are just as potent as they were 30 years ago. But then if you take other contemporaries of the punk, that punk era, while they're revolutionary and nobody's going to argue that without them, people couldn't have come after them and all that, I don't actually enjoy listening to their music. A lot of it's not good music. Like, to me, it's not musically fun to listen to. Well, it might have been cool to be at that show or hear, those three chords mashed over and over again, the screaming. It's
kind
just
of a
not
you got
for me.
To be there thing, right?
Yeah, it really seems like that. A lot of it, like a lot of the Sex Pistols stuff to me is that way. Even some of the Ramones stuff, although I do like the Ramones a lot.
I think Ace Man would appreciate the fact that Bad Religion was probably talking about trouble in the Middle East in the late 70s, early 80s, and look what they're talking about now. Probably.
Well, people don't know this, but they are neck and neck with Dag for the most Adam era of Loveline episodes. They did Loveline a lot before Adam, but nowhere near as much as they did while he was on the show, and they don't do it nearly as much as that now, which is a strange thing. And
I wonder why.
They've been ignored almost completely by Adam's radio show. They got 12 minutes after I begged for 2 years, and then they have not yet been on the podcast. They did last for Bald Brian, but only people who went to that show saw it, or people who bought the podcast. And they played music, they didn't talk. So you got a few of their songs if you bought the podcast, but not all 8 they played. And we still have not heard them talk with Adam in years, and it's kind of depressing.
Yeah, and it's not like they're from England or something. Aren't they from the kind of the same area around L.A.? Or?
Greg's out in New York all the time because he lives out there. His kids are out there, I think, but he's always in L.A., so there's really no reason it can't happen. If they can get him for Bald Brian's charity event, and Bald Brian's really never expressed any interest in the band, but they're just doing him a solid, why not get him for all the listeners,
Yeah, exactly. Pay them back a little bit for their effort.
Yeah, I tried. I went after the show for Blast for Bald Brian. I got Chaffee aside. I was like, Chaffee, go give him your car, take their car, do something. I was like almost like trying to give him a boost up onto the stage, but he got himself up. But like I was like rushing behind him, like trying to like shove him up there. So he scurried up the stage and ran after him. And I think Jay Bentley was wearing a kilt, so he ran up after Jay.
Really?
So I was like, wow, he's wearing a dress.
He was right behind him. Yeah. Well, it's funny. Graffin is probably in his late 40s and still looks all of about 25, right?
Yeah, I've bought tickets to several Bad Religion shows, but through odd situations was denied entry at all of them. And the only show I've ever made into was finally in 2007 in Honolulu at the Pipeline Cafe. I saw Bad Religion late 2007, like November or so. And the club was so hot, like after the opening band, that they kept flooding it with this weird AC spray from the ceiling. It was like literally like fire extinguishers being poured on the crowd. Wow. But it was like 120-something degrees in there.
That's when you shoot the video, I think.
Yeah, they blew out the wireless mic, then they blew out the wired mic with the heat and the humidity. So they had to wrap it up after like a mere 22 songs, which if you're a Bad Religion fan, know that's a pretty short show.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Yeah, I think that punk is really more about attitude than image. Or I've got a couple friends that are more punk than most people. They don't have the tattoos and the piercings, and I think it's more about your attitude than really, if you have your hair in a mohawk or whatever.
I say attitude's a part of it, but in terms of music, musically, there's a lot of bands I wanted to include on this list who aren't defined as punk music, but they have the punk attitude, like the Gits. It's a band from Seattle. They made a documentary about the band and what happened to them. Their lead singer was horribly murdered. It's just a tragic story.
I actually been reading up on that, and funny thing about that, have you been seeing those new unsolved mysteries that have been coming out? It's weird because they take stock footage from like the early 90s and I think the late 80s, yet they got a new host. They got Dennis Farina hosting it, so it's a weird mashup of old and new, and it's kind of interesting to go watch that. And it was funny because I was turning it on a random episode, and there are the Gits. And there's that story you were saying, and they mentioned Kurt Cobain and all the Seattle stuff.
Yeah, what's interesting about that band is like they're the only Seattle band that didn't run themselves into the ground. Like they weren't responsible for their own demise as a band. Like their guitarist Joe Spinelli or whatever, he's considered one of the greatest guitarists alive, but he doesn't play music because of what happened. And nobody in the band asked for that. It was just this weird, tragic situation. I really want to include them on the list, but they're not technically punk music, even though they have a couple songs that have like a punk beat, a punk, punk guitars, punk rhythm. They have everything a punk song would have, but they're not defined as a punk band, even though they have a punk attitude. So I decided to leave them off my list, even though I'll put them on as an honorable mention, I guess.
Yeah, I was feeling that same way about bands like Oasis, and like when they first came out, I remember seeing Liam Gallagher at the Video Music Awards. I think it was '96, and at the end of Champagne Supernova, he lets a loogie go that just like slowly hangs out of his mouth, and this is like on live TV, and it drops to the floor. And yet they're not really considered punk, obviously, but they did have that attitude, and a lot of bands have that attitude, but chose to go different ways musically. So yeah, I did leave those out as well. So
with him doing that though, I assume that's more just him being British and a drug addict.
That's probably true. Yeah.
What's your number 5? You want to go with my number 5 first, or yours?
Yeah, I'd like to hear your number 5.
This is going to be controversial, but I wanted to throw them in here for something, and this is kind of like my favorite era of the band. But AFI, Fire Inside, people always shit on that band, and especially now. But if you look what they were doing in the late '90s, when they kind of went to this whole like horror punk. Punk core, like there's weird like different names for it, but Black Sails in the Sunset is their album they made in '99. That's their full length. It's a great album. I still listen to it this day. It's always on my iPod. But I prefer more The Art of Drowning from 2000, which they recorded in '99, but wasn't released till 2000. But technically, I wanted to be right on the list, so I went with Black Sails in the Sunset, '99. Different kind of style of punk, but you can't argue it's not punk. The music's faster than shit. The slow stuff has an awesome edge to it. It invokes this great sort of Danzig and old school, what am I thinking of, Misfits flavor.
Yeah, I was going to say, they took a page out of the Misfits book kind of with like a little bit of a horror theme, but keeping with like the angst of, adolescence.
Yeah, but they also have their own unique sound in addition to being able to mimic the Misfits vibe in a way. It doesn't feel like, they're somehow less than the Misfits, but more like they're better than the Misfits and they're invoking their heroes as opposed to like some sort of like derivative imitation.
Yeah, I was working at the record store, I think, in '03, and they released their album in '03. I forget what it's called, but there was production by Butch Vig, who did Nevermind, and Gish by Pumpkins. And that was when it was still very, it was still very epic and still pretty punk. But after that, I think, is when Baby Havoc maybe turned into a diva or a little bit something watered down a little bit. But I do respect that, their 90s output is still pretty slamming.
Well, I've heard them talk about, like, they can't relate to the people who wrote the song Serial Wars on their very early EP and their early album, just like they can't relate to like, a lot of people are that way, where they can't, like, Darren Aronofsky said about his movies, like, he loves the movie Requiem for a Dream, but he has no idea who the filmmaker was who made that movie, and that's not him today. So, like, he could never make that movie again. And I think that's the same way with bands a lot of times, especially if they're talented, is their music will change and become, watered down or this or that. Or you could just say it's become symphonic and slow and kind of a different thing. I think that's more what it is. That's what they're interested in. But, yeah, I like all versions of them, but my favorite is still always going to be the 97 to 2001 AFI.
Yeah, I always hate it when bands will write off their early material because it's too simple or.
They don't really do that. They just can't relate to it. I think they have a good handle. They were great Loveline guests in the Adam era too.
All right, well I'm gonna go with my number 5. I got Fugazi with Repeater from 1990. Ian MacKaye and pals from the Discord record label, a DC band. Any thoughts on Fugazi?
Legends, I know more about them and stories about them than I know their actual music. Like, Fugazi would always come up, on Loveline, and various other, like, sources I have or other bands would reference Fugazi, or they'd be like, oh, they got their idea from Fugazi or whatever. But I don't know much about them. They have a black lead singer, right? Or no, that's Fishbone I'm thinking of.
No, that's Fishbone. That's Fishbone. These are like white skinheads, kind of more straight edge, I think.
I've heard about them a lot, like, coming up.
Like Minor Threat was one of the bands, and Rites of Spring. And Rites of Spring, I guess, is the first straight edge. They tattoo the crap on their lip and shit.
Yeah.
They don't smoke, drink. Yeah.
I'm not familiar with this album at all. What are the known tracks or the best tracks on it?
Well, I'd go with the title track, Repeater. Kind of just gives their sound in a nutshell. I think they self-distributed it, and
what they sound
they were
like?
Also the ones who created Discord Records, a pretty famous punk label out of DC. The lead singer was the guy who created that label. So
what do they sound like? Who do they sound like?
I would say, if you know Minor Threat,
yeah,
that's one of the bands that came. That's them. It's just like the newer band, like a newer version of Minor Threat, mixed with guys from Rites of Spring. So it's kind of fast. It's also literal or kind of educated lyrics and stuff like that. More angsty lyrics too. But, fast beat, fast rhythm, and pretty groundbreaking sound for 1990. Obviously, in 2000, if you listen to punk in the year 2000, it would be so different. It's kind of like a 180 turn from the stuff they were releasing at the turn of the decade. But
I'll have to check that out, though. I'll check that out when this is over.
Cool. Sounds good, Gio. How about number 4 on your list?
My number 4, I went super commercial and super non-obvious in a way. I've actually mentioned this before, like on Corolla boards or somewhere, and people try to make me eat my own shit for mentioning it, but people hate this band. But the Offspring in 97 put out an album called Ixnay on the Hombre, which they've always said is their most punk album, even compared to their early stuff, and they've always tried to get back to this one album and how the sound is on it. And it does, the songs do kind of all sound the same now that I'm older, and it is very poppy, and it is very, radio-friendly, but it is a good pop-punk album. It's actually great. It's my favorite Offspring album is Ixnay on the Hombre, and I'm not even the hugest Offspring fan, but I just thought I had to put it on there because I felt like I shouldn't put it on there because people mock it, but then I go, that's the exact reason you probably should put it on there.
Well, you're not going to get mocked on the Andy Dare show because I walked probably 3 miles in snow. I think that came out February of 97. We're about the same age, so I think we were in 6th or 7th grade. I walked in the snow to a Coconuts music store and grabbed that. So,
yeah,
and I do appreciate it. I think like maybe a few years later, I did the same thing. Said, "Oh no, that's not cool anymore. That's lame now." But you got to like All I Want. You got Gone Away. I think was on there, right? And
I don't know if Gone Away was, but there's All I Want. There's a few great ones on there. They had a couple radio hits on there. It's the one before Pretty Fly for a White Guy. So it had like I think I Choose is on this one. I can't remember all of them, but I know All I Want, and there's that other really fast song that I dig on there as well.
Well, I was going to ask you, he was the valedictorian of his high school when he graduated. Is that punk? Because I was going to bring that up. Can you be punk and be the valedictorian?
Yeah, if the other guy in your band is your janitor from your high school, I think he can be. I think you know.
That is true. Noodles was the janitor.
Yeah, and also if you grow up to be a guy who invents a hot sauce that your maid gives you a recipe for, and you like to restore Czechoslovakian fighter jets and fly them around in your free time, and try to hang out with Adam Carolla, yeah, pretty punk. I'd say that's pretty punk.
That is true. I forgot about the Jets, too. Yeah, he is quite an amalgam, that Dexter Holland, huh?
Yeah,
and he had dreads during the Smash era.
Yeah, he did. And before that, too. He had it before it was cool, but while he was to be mocked for. Then he had it while it was cool. Then he still had it while everybody was making fun of everybody else for having it, even though he had it first.
All right, well, they might come up later. Who knows?
Okay.
But, well, number 4. Yeah, I got my number 4 here. I got Rancid with ... and Out Come the Wolves.
Okay.
Killer record. If you like ska, if you like ska but you don't like, the real the real poppy ska, this is really guttered, kind of gangster ska music, throwing in punk, throwing in hardcore, but really an ear for a knack for a pop melody, if I say so myself.
Is this the one where Master Killer, where that guy, that reggae artist, joined them for that one single, Grab Your Boot or whatever? Or is that after this?
Oh, I think that was the one after. I think that was Life Won't Wait. But
okay, yeah, no, I dig this album a lot, actually. I remember this one quite well, except for that single.
I like Lunchables. Nice.
Indeed, yeah. I got my list on the phone, and somebody had to text me.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I think Tim Armstrong, he really invented a style of sing, but also slurring and sounding like drool is emanating from your mouth. That's a pretty punk milestone, I think. And
yeah,
just,
or like you're singing with broken teeth, I always imagine.
Spikes and stuff.
He always sounds like he's singing with broken teeth, like Shane MacGowan kind of.
That might be the least band I would ever want to meet in a dark alleyway, I think.
Rancid or the Pogues?
I think Rancid would scare the bejesus out of me. So
I think I'd handle Rancid. I'd be okay. They seem like decent guys.
Well, that's true.
They're all old now, too, so they can't really do that homeless punk life on the street thing anymore. Now they just want to brush their teeth and have a pillow.
Yeah, I wonder if they are squatting somewhere. I really highly doubt that. But, all right. Well, that's my number 4. How about actually in between this list, I would like to just give one shout out to a couple friends. Throw a little plug ski in there.
Sure.
Obviously, the Fleetcast. Great comedy and musical variety show out of Chicago. Gio's done the show a couple times. Do check them out. They're at the fleetcast.podbean.com. That good old Podbean. And follow them at Fleetcast. And then I've got one more show here. I think Gio should check this one out. The guy's name is Matthew Aaron, and he's got a sitcom in the works. He goes back and forth from Cali and Chicago. But he's also living at home with his mom in Downers Grove. Not that that's a bad thing. But he's got his own little variety show as well, and they do a lot of pop culture talk, if I can speak here. And it's straight out of his basement, but they put a lot of money into it. They got like 4 or 5 people on there at a time. They got some big guests. They got the guy who was Crazy Eyed Killa from Curb Your Enthusiasm to call in last week or 2 weeks ago. And that is thematthewaaronshow.com, and follow them at Matt Aaron Show. That's the handle, and that's AARON. So thanks for throwing those in there.
Oh, no problem, man.
Yeah, well, we're up to our number 3s here, and I think Gio, you were up to the bat.
Yeah, mine. I want to put a Pennywise album in there because they're legends when it comes to Loveline, and also my own fandom of punk music. I dig their sound, and I know Ben Folds made fun of them on his Loveline after their famous incident where he talked about how their 3 chords, they all sound the same, but they're able to do a lot with those 3 chords. I decided to throw in. I was thinking Full Circle, but I don't know. I really only like a couple tracks off there. I really like. The one track they did twice that I can't think of right now. They did it as a tribute to Jason.
Right?
Yeah, the Bro Hymn tribute. Yeah, I love both versions of that. But I'd say my favorite Pennywise album is really Straight Ahead. It's the one with Alien, their biggest radio hit, and then a couple other awesome tracks on there. And I still have it on my iPod to this day all the time, and anytime a song comes on, I don't skip it, even though they kind of all do sound the same.
Was that 98 or 97?
I think it was 99 when that album came out, because the incident was in 99. They were promoting the album. I always want to say 98, but... They were promoting the album in 99 on Loveline in June, so it must be 99.
Well, I put them on my list of honorable mentions because I call that kind of truer punk list. I got like a top 5 truer punk that I would just go through real quick at the end. But
sure.
All right, yeah, for my number 3, back to The Offspring, and I went with the easier get, and now I feel like I got egg on my face, but I got to say it's a legendary album, got me into liking music. I got the cassette the month it came out in 1994, I believe. That is Smash. And I was thinking about how even the album cover is such a simple little piece of just the outline of a skeleton or whatever. But when you see that album cover, it instantly, brings you back to those days. And especially with the music, too. You got Jello Biafra from the Dead Kennedys doing the intro. And I think hit after hit. Maybe they might have had 4 or 5 hit singles off that sucker.
Maybe 6. And Jello also did the interstitials on Ixnay. And what's interesting about that record is I didn't like rock music at this time. I grew up in this weird Afghani babysitter's house, and the only music I was exposed to that I liked was rap music, because it was like the hair metal days of MTV. And I was like, oh man, these guys are so fucking faggy. I was like 5 and I was thinking this. And then now I'm an adult and I realize how inappropriate that is, but I had terrible influences around. And so, I like maybe 1 or 2 Metallica songs, like the one where the guy loses Johnny, whatever his name, the guy loses all his arms and shit.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
I like that video and that song, and then I liked only rap. So in '94, when this album was out, I remember it vividly because I dug all the music on there. I'd hear it like video arcades, or I hear it here or there. And I was like, oh, this is that album. And I remember the skeleton cover because that album was probably stolen from my friends between each other more than any other album there is. Like people just steal it from each other all the time. It was ubiquitous theft of Smash amongst 11-year-olds and that.
And what a range of styles. I mean, you got I was thinking about Self-Esteem. That was kind of weird because he was playing himself as like the victim in the relationship, which hadn't been heard too much in even rock music. It would kind of be like the Stones would be kind of like embarrassed to sing a song about how he's being taken advantage of by his girlfriend. But that's what kind of
honest, it's honest and it's also badass. And that song, like, I remember my friends' moms love that song. So it's like, that's a radio hit a mom can like, and it was also a cool song. I remember hearing it as a kid, I was like, oh, a woman could do this to you. I was like, oh shit, this is a good warning. This is going to be a terrible, sad life for me.
Well, I guess it kind of harkens back to Ace Man talks about all the time about how in the 70s a big song topic was, evil, wicked woman, the gypsy woman trying to rob you for your gold or whatever. But
no, it has a similar vibe, but also that album just had so many weird ballads almost, but that aren't ballads, but things where he's just straight up singing on a slow song. That is a great album. It just didn't feel. I didn't want to classify it as punk because it has more of a melodic thing, and the rock stuff is rockier. But I like the opening 2 tracks a lot. The opening number 2 was always my favorite track, and then Bad Habit was.
Oh, Bad Habit, yeah.
Everybody loves Bad Habit when you're a kid, but the one before that, number 2, was Nitro Youth Energy. I still love that fucking song. It's still
that one will pump anybody up. If that's not played in locker rooms and professional sporting events,
they're missing out.
Yeah, really.
That's like narcotics, man. Even if you don't like this band, you hear that song, you're ready to just punch a locker, scream in somebody's face, and spit Gatorade on somebody.
Very true, and that's kind of why I consider that a punk album. But a lot of punk bands forget to bring their melodies when they're recording, and not so with The Offspring, and not so with the next 2 bands I've got as well. But how say you about your number 2, Gio?
My number 2 is Death by Television from the Lillingtons. The Lillingtons are a lesser-known punk band. They're out of Wyoming or somewhere. They were around from 95 till 2000 or so. And I don't know much about them myself. There's a wiki you can read, but there's some guys. They have this really unique sound. They almost sound British, but they're not. And they have this great kind of timeless sound to them. And they have these lyrics. They're all sci-fi themed about weird stuff, bizarre shit I'd be into, but they got this very, very interesting vibe, and they came back in 2006 with some album. The fuck is it called? It's my favorite one of theirs, but it had this song called what the fuck? It's this one about aliens invading Earth, and they used it. Somebody used it in a fan made trailer for James Gunn's Slither.
Okay.
And I heard the song, and I was like, who the fuck is this band? And I had to find it back in 2006. And they're like, oh, it's this band. Here's this album. And I finally found it. I was like, oh, this is great. And then I went back to their album from 99, Death by Television, and it's just as good. And it's this great classic punk album that nobody really knows about. And that's probably why they broke up, is just because they didn't see a career.
Yeah. Well, I do these lists because at least always one of the list I will not know of, and I do like learning about new bands always. That one you are completely educating me about. I think I saw you tweet about him or something because the name rings a bell or something about James Gunn. But yeah, never heard a lick of him, and that will make me go and make sure I come. I
highly recommend you do that. They're actually it'll pay off great for you. They're a really great band, and I'm really happy to have them as like one of my favorite bands now. So I can bust them out and be like, oh, you don't know the Lillingtons?
Yeah, I always do that. I'm always the guy at the party who busts out the weird music, and then people will start digging it, So.
Well, yeah, like with Death by Television, particularly, they're like, oh, when's this from? Like 1987? You're like, no, it's from '99, asshole.
That's awesome. Sweet. All right, my number 2. Going from the Lillingtons to, I'd say one of the top pop albums of the 90s, but it's still punk. It's Dookie by Green Day. And say as much as you will about how Green Day, they've gone towards the eyeliner style, they've gone towards the making musical style, and, having 5 or 6 people up on stage. But at this point, they were still 3, deadbeats.
Dropping acid, milking dogs into their coffee.
Chopping up their couches with, a butter knife and just going crazy at the same time. But that bass line to Longview, I mean, that is just like, I think Mozart would have really dug having that riff on one of his songs.
Yeah, that is a classic track.
And it's back when, you could tell they were still trying to live trying to make it in music and living out of a van or doing whatever they had to do, skipping meals, you can tell, because Billy Joe is like, a good 95 pounds at this point or something. But that's when it seems like bands are just making their most purest moment. And I do like Kerplunk and the albums before it, but this is when it all just clicked together. And even Insomniac, while Insomniac's pretty much up to that point, there's a little bit of a lag off. And then slowly but surely they would descend into a more arena rock sound and, be playing for the teeny boppers and whatnot. But at this point, nobody can really knock it. Even once again, the cover of the album comes up for me because you'd see it on a poster in a room, and you'd see every little detail that went into that piece of art.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was like something your friend would draw at his house or something.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like when they used to put a lot of time and effort into the album and the packaging and the album cover. Now I think they just slapped that all together using Adobe Photoshop. But at this point, they probably wanted something that would really speak for the music that's inside of the album. And I really think the album cover, the album itself, and the band in 1994 were pretty much... There was nobody on par with them, especially since one band had just stopped working in early '94. But Green Day was pretty much top of the mountain at that point for me, at least.
That's a really good pick. I didn't think to pick them. That's probably the best time to pick them too. Was right when that album came out.
And talk about lyrics, like that was kind of like if Dylan was squatting in a crazy, drug-infested warehouse or something. I think he'd be singing about the same things. Timeless music, timeless lyrics, and I would really hope that Green Day will once again return to this sound, but not looking likely. And one thing that's cool about music is that bands can actually have a big comeback. And say what you will about the Foo Fighters, playing Wembley Stadium, playing all these huge places, hit after hit in the 2000s, kind of watering down their sound. But they reunited with Butch Vig, who did Nevermind, as I've been saying earlier. And did the album on tape and
all analog. Yeah, they recorded analog.
All analog, and Foo Fighters just released a documentary, and I got it. It's called Back and Forth. Really powerful movie. I think it's 100 minutes. It goes into the whole making of the album, and it'll just really get you psyched for Dave Grohl, and just, man, he really actually did make a comeback on this one. So do check that album out too.
Yeah, I think I got a copy of that movie from my girlfriend.
Oh, yeah, she'll eat it up with a spoon because it's got a whole bunch of unreleased stuff about Kurt, photos that we had never seen, stuff about their last days, Dave being, timid to even play his demo and stuff, then all leading up until these huge shows in Wembley, soccer stadiums in England and playing with Jimmy Page and stuff like that. So Yeah, check that out. It's Back and Forth, the movie, and their new album's called Wasting Light. I've talked about it on the show a little bit, but yeah, definitely one of my favorite albums of the year so far.
Well, that's cool. You want me to get to my number one?
Yeah, ready for our number one pick, Mr. Giovanni Giorgio.
I had to put a Bad Religion on here somewhere, so I chose 1993's Recipe for Hate. I wasn't into Bad Religion at this time, but I remember hearing some of it like on the radio, I think. And like I'd heard of them at least, and at this time I was like 10 years old. So by the time I actually got into their music, it was towards the end of the 90s, and this was the album that I first got into because they played American Jesus on one of the Box video channels. It was a service where you could call up and request a music video for $2.99, or you could just watch it all day. Yeah, you just watch all day and see what everybody else picked, but American Jesus would come on all the fucking time, and I was like, wow, these guys are smart. 'Cause at the time, I was just discovering like the hypocrisy of religious people and all this weird shit, and everybody at school had "What Would Jesus Do" pins, and I was like, what are these guys about? And then I quickly learned, it's way more than this, and that stuff's, dumb and petty. You don't even need to worry about it. But that's what got me into the band, and this album still holds up, the most melodic, fucking catchy-ass fucking songs. It's radio-friendly. It's just a great, great album.
Was that with 21st Century Digital Boy?
I believe that's on there. That's the one everybody always talks about. It might be on the next one.
I think they re-recorded it for that or something.
Yeah, it's something like that. Or they recorded this one and re-record for the next. But it has a... Let's see, what does it have on there? I'm trying to think of the names of the songs. Jesus, I haven't heard some of these in a while. Well, it's got American Jesus. I think it has Atomic Garden, which I love. And then it's got a few others. Let me pop it up on my phone real quick. I got it on here. It's a classic. I was thinking about putting like the Gray Race or something when they went to Atlantic, but it didn't feel right to put one of those albums on there and not this one. And then I was thinking, what about some of the post-Brett era, like after they went to Atlantic and he left, like...
So did Gurewitz leave when they went to Atlantic because he was...
I think that was...
Epitaph, or?
I think he recorded some of that audio or something, but yeah, I think that's basically when he left. And then after that they did... No Substance, and then The New America, which I never liked, and then now, years later, I actually love. I love both of those albums a lot. And Greg has gone back and said, like, some of their most creatively bankrupt stuff is on those albums. And I probably agree, but it's just the creatively bankrupt Bad Religion is still pretty fucking good.
Yeah, that's like saying Bad Piece of Gold, kind of.
Yeah, the track listing on Recipe for Hate, which is great, Kerosene... That's okay. Yeah, American Jesus, Portrait of Authority, Man with a Mission, All Good Soldiers, Watch It Die, Struck a Nerve, which is great, My Poor Friend Me, Looking In, Don't Pray on Me, Modern Day Catastrophist, Skyscraper, which is one of my all-time favorites, and Stealth.
I think they fit into that thing I was talking about earlier about saying, like, punk's more about the attitude and what's in your mind than the image. Because Greg Gaffin could be, a substitute teacher at any high school.
Yeah, bald guy in a polo shirt and khakis.
Exactly.
I have this photograph from when they play the Pipeline. They all look like they jumped into a pool. Not like their clothes are wet. They're wearing jeans, and the jeans are soggy. Like, literally, they're wetter than if they had jumped into a pool. Like, they're dripping. Like, it's stuck to... They can't even move anymore because they're so soaking wet. And it's just so crazy. That's how hot it was in there. Like, I have a guy elbowing me in the face in one of the photos. You just see sweat pouring off me.
That's funny. Got to spray some Febreze on him or something.
It stunk so bad. I was like, oh man, there's no way I'm getting out of this pit without hepatitis.
Was that back when you could smoke in the clubs? Or?
This was 2007, so no, but it was smoky enough with the weird AC spray, the chemical spray they were using.
Oh yeah. All right, well, I'd like to end the episode, and I'd like to, I'm going to say my number one a little bit, but I'd like to thank Mr. Giovanni Giorgio, Adam Carolla Superfan. Thank you so much for talking on the show.
No problem.
And so my listeners, where can they find Mr. Gio? You can plug all the stuff you want to plug right now, if you'd like.
Gio Podcast, GIO Podcast.com. I take old Loveline clips, chop them up, throw in some commentary, new interviews, sometimes clips from the podcast, clips from other stuff. That's what we call the Beyond. So GeoPodcast.com is the best place. Also, if you look on Twitter or Facebook, Giovanni Giorgio or Geo Podcast on Facebook.
And we were talking that it's also kind of kismet that Get It On, Adam Carolla's sign-on, is in your name 3 times, right?
Yeah, Giovanni and then Giorgio spelled Giorgio. Basically, my middle name is Gio R. Gio. Like, such a weird... Gio R. Gio?
And bring us back to the Great Magnet, right?
Indeed.
But, All right. Well, this has been the Andy Dare Show. You can always find us at theandydareshow.podbean.com. You can follow me at Andy Dare. That's ANDYDERER. Got a new Facebook group. I think we're up to like 27 or something, trying to make that grow steadily, but it's so far so good.
Once you hit 25, you can get a custom URL.
Yeah, I got that at 20. I'm at 27, so I got the URL. So hopefully the world is mine now.
Yeah.
And you can do that at facebook.com. / The Andy Dare Show. And that brings us to our number one punk album of the 1990s, according to Giovanni Giorgio and Andy Dare. I've got, once again, this is probably one of those, top 5 even pop hits of the 1990s, but I can argue that it's punk. Nevermind by Nirvana.
Yeah, that's Katie would have killed us if one of us didn't pick it.
Yeah, I didn't want to get on her bad side, so thought I'd throw it in. And the fact that, I got this on tape, when it came, or not when it came out, I got to be honest, about 3 or 4 years after it came out, but we were still young and getting cassettes and trading cassettes. This album just blew my mind, made me want to pick up the guitar, made me want to ask my dad, who's this band, who's that band, made me want to go with my dad to the record store and just, spend hours digging away. And really just kind of as a lifestyle changer at that point, 1991. And the reason why it is punk, you can say as much as you want about it sounding like a Boston melody for Smells Like Teen Spirit, or, something in the way with a cello and other stuff like that, Beatlesque harmonies and loud, tinny drum sound courtesy of Butch Vig. But they brought the punk as much as they did the pop, and that's what makes it such a legendary recording. Territorial Pissings, just the title itself, made you scratch your head and say, what is this about? And then you go and listen to it, and, it's a minute 58 of Kurt Cobain screaming till his vocal cords are wrecked, a la, John Lennon doing Twist and Shout when he had a cold. And, other things were just as punk. The song Polly is about a rapist or something. Just real dark lyrics from a psyche that will never be able to tap again. But, just has fathoms and fathoms of weird knowledge and weird emotions coming out of this young songwriter. And, he died at age 27, which is, I think it's your age too. It's my age as well. And put such a body of work behind him. So I gotta say, this is the number one punk album of the 1990s, and as I was saying earlier, it was easier to, say what punk was in the 1980s, especially in the 1970s, as easy as just looking at the band in the 1970s. You could say, okay, well, they're not FM rock. They're punk. They're from New York. They're from downtown. They're from the East Village or whatever. Then in the 80s, it became more of a thing like MTV started even playing some of this stuff. And then the 1990s came around and put it at the top of the charts, put it on the cover of every magazine, put it on MTV. It was household name by now, punk music.
Well, I'd have to put Nirvana in my honorable mentions too, but because, much like the Gits, they get classified as a grunge band for being in the grunge scene of Seattle, you kind of, I didn't want to, have to deal with people whining about it, but yeah, they definitely had a punk sound, sensibility, and, what was it, Silver, whatever that song is, Grandma Take Me Home. That's not on that album, but that's a straight up punk song in my mind. That's one of my favorite Nirvana songs, probably. But honorable mentions,
even more punk. You could argue with the In Utero, but I just went with what my favorite album was. That's Nevermind. So.
No, I think it's highly appropriate. I think we should probably throw a couple other honorable mentions. I was thinking of No Fun at All. This is a band that I've only recently discovered a couple of years back when I was in Hawaii with the song Stranded, where they, in 2 minutes, basically expressed everything that was going through my mind while I was stranded on that island. And they're this, skate punk. I was going to say there's a skate punk band or something. I can't really quite tell. Like the Lillingtons, I haven't delved into their history, even though it's readily available to me. I can't tell if they're from the U.S. or from, Germany or somewhere, because the lead singer has a little bit of an accent, almost like Millencolin, this other kind of newer...
Oh, I know Millencolin.
Yeah, so the lead singer has a little bit of that kind of sound in his voice, but not really. No Fun at All. Check out their, I think it's Master Celebrations or Master Celebrate or something. They have, some best of that's 30 songs, 30 of their best songs. That's how I found them. And then I went back and bought all their individual albums. But they were a great punk band. They might still be going, but they had a bunch of shit in the 90s, and nobody knew about it. At least I didn't. And it's good stuff.
Cool. Yeah, I got to honorably mention Sublime.
Oh, yeah.
Just because they would always mix it up a whole bunch, use a lot of dub reggae, use a lot of reggae, soul influence as well. But just having a 3-piece, touring out of the van, and then half the set would be just like, really rock and punk music. You can't really overlook, even the self-titled album, there's half of it's just really in-your-face punk music.
See, that's a band where their fans and audience have ruined their music for me. Not just in the sense that their fans and audience are annoying, but they play it so often and so much around you that it becomes like this thing where it's like, well, I like that music, and you've now just ruined it for me.
Yeah, that's sort of true. They beat it to the ground a little bit, especially getting a new lead singer and touring with this guy. I'm not too
Long Beach Dub, you're not a fan of the All-Stars?
Oh, I like the All-Stars. I just don't like the new Sublime with...
I know they're doing a new Sublime now. They're doing that now?
Oh, they're doing it, and they're charging $60 a ticket, playing amphitheaters around the...
Does the guy sound like Bradley? Is that what it's about, or is he supposed to be like a new guy?
A little bit, yeah, but not. You can't hold a candle, though. You can't really capture that again. But yeah, I'd say Sublime, Pennywise, No Effects, Bad Religion, early AFI. You covered most of my bases. So
cool. All right, man. Well, this has been great, Andy. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Well, on behalf of Giovanni Giorgio, this is Andy Dare signing off. Thank you so much for listening.
Get it on.